Today, we're going to talk about actually closing. We're going to talk about what it takes to seal the deal, but also we're going to talk about what is and isn't closing. I thought we would share to start the impetus for this particular topic for me personally. I heard from one of the founders I talked to just like some sales guru stuff. And for those of you who know me a little bit, you know that I am just like I'm categorically offended by most of the conventional wisdom in sales. The reason that I do what I do is that I believe that being yourself is the only way to successfully sell, especially in our industry. And I'm offended by the idea that you could just do a thing that is templatized and somehow be successful. That doesn't work for me. But so the idea of a closing script came up in this conversation. And my response was kind of flipped. It was just like, well, why would you need a closing script? Why wouldn't you just be more memorable? But so after that, I kind of spent some time thinking about it as I tend to, and what I realized was that unlike in other industries where there might actually be a moment of close, right? There might be a moment where you say, "That's my pitch," and it's over, and the person on the other end of that pitch says yes or no, and then there's a handshake or not, and then a deal is done. It's not really how our industry works, right? There are many layers and nuances to the decision to win, sometimes even the smallest project. And most of those things happen in rooms that we are not in, right? Most of them are sort of outside of our control. And so I wanted to unpack what it means to get as close as possible to closing while you can, to set yourself up to succeed when you have the time, energy, and attention of your prospective client, and when you don't, and also how to not be a closer in the way that we've maybe been trained to. And so Matt and I had a lot of fun thinking about what that sort of does and doesn't mean.
Yeah, I had the on Instagram the Glenn Ross scene with Alec Baldwin popped up to me the other day where he's just like if you haven't seen it, it's like the classic sales film where Alec Baldwin is a real estate salesman and he's in a room bullying these old real estate salesmen that aren't selling and they get all their leads on paper cards and he's going always be closing and he's lecturing them again and again. And well, he's a bully basically. He's a macho bully. He's exactly the sort of guy that I'm pretty sure none of us are, or none of us really wanted to hang out with at high school. And he's yelling at these guys, saying, closers get coffee, closers get coffee. He's trying to humiliate them, and he's telling them how he could walk out with 5 leads and make $15,000 tonight in the rain. And he's just an offensive person. And I think for a lot of us, that is the stereotype of what a salesman is. And that also really embodies that myth is that you can get someone to seal the deal on the spot, that you can trick them with your tactics, and that there are special words that are going to flip them and make them want to buy a house at 9 o'clock at night in Chicago in the rain, which I don't believe people would do anyway. But he was convinced he was, and his expensive watch also told him that he could do it.
Yeah, and honestly, like most of my job is hearing from people who are desperate to avoid looking like that, right? Like I talk to a lot of people who are like, I just don't want to feel salesy. So there's this idea that there's a version of you that has to transform into some iteration of Alec Baldwin in one way or another. And so part of the thing that it's like that it's interesting to talk about today is that like, well, not only do we not have to do that, like we don't even really get the chance to do that much. So like the first thing we wanted to kind of say is that like, well, you're off the hook for worrying about whether you're effective at closing in the room because it's not really happening. Instead, I think we wanted to kind of back up and talk about a few of the things that you are on the hook for doing to make sure that when the moment strikes, you are the one chosen. Because, I mean, less often today than maybe 12 months ago, but a decision is made more often than not. Again, knock on wood, I see the way the trends are going, but a decision is going to be made. So the question is, when it's made, whether you're sort of there or not, how are you making sure that you are the one that is chosen? And if you're not the one chosen today, how are you the one that they think of when the need that they have arises again, or a similar need for which you're a better fit sort of shows up? And surprise, the answer isn't always be closing. The answer is start a lot earlier, work your way through a process. And so I think we wanted to talk a little bit about some things that have worked for us. And Matt, you had something really interesting that you've observed at Mighty Nice specifically, kind of around pre-work.
Yeah, I mean, like quite often the decision may be made before you even get into the room to present. And we sort of find that we pretty much always know um, if we're going to get the job before we've pitched. Like I think we've our AP is really good at asking questions and really good at, I mean, like she might do 6 rounds of questions with their producer to find out every little bit of information we need, so we're scoping it right. I mean, these are on the bigger projects, certainly not on the smaller projects where we get 6 rounds of questions, but definitely a few. And you want to make sure you're answering the right question. And so our pitch and our quote and many things would have been um, really responded to. And it's your chance to build that relationship before you go into the room to throw it all down. I think if you haven't made an opportunity to talk to them before a pitch or before a presentation, you're really missing out. And certainly, even going for like government funding or film funding opportunities, if you haven't made an appointment to speak to them before the deadline or before you're putting in your submission, you're not going to get it.
When I was at bigger agencies, we obviously scheduled these things, right? It was part of a an expected and pretty well structured process that there would be one, two, or three points where we could share thinking, ask questions. It would be expected that it was incomplete. When I was running my own shop, and as I'm advising smaller studios, that's not necessarily the case. And one of the patterns I notice in smaller shops is a pattern of fear of asking too many questions.
Yeah.
If I ask a thing, it'll look like I don't know. That fear response couldn't be less healthy when you're thinking about setting yourself up to win.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to
And
read
so,
someone's mind. You need to. This is your chance to actually get to know them, and they want you to ask questions. You don't want to be answering the wrong question.
and I just I can't say enough. Like people's phone numbers are in their email signatures, I don't know, 9 times out of 10. And so truly, if you're thinking about it, sort of putting together a presentation or even honestly putting together a bid and trying to scope it correctly, if you don't know the answer to a thing, and your impulse is to guess as opposed to just being like ding ding ding, hello, surprise, it's me, I have a quick question, then your impulse is wrong.
Yeah.
That is what endears you. That is what shows that you're intentional. And that when we talk about being the person they or being the studio they pick, when there's three proposals laid out on the table, not that anything's printed anymore. When there's three laid out at a table, that's the one who thought the most about this bid. Is often gonna be the difference maker. Pardon me.
Yeah. My 15-year-old was critiquing me for not actually using a phone number. He's like, people have these phones, but they just use them for texting or they think they're for all these other things. But simple calling people is underrated nowadays. I know some people find it horrific and way too much, but it's really easy. And it's what phones were invented for.
And I definitely apologize for the cold call first, right? I'll just hit him like, "Hi, sorry for the cold call," and just get my Midwest out of the way, right? It's like I know you didn't ask for this, and then you got to get into it. And so I think that when we talk about closing, like you have to open the door before you close it. And so
Yeah.
I think that level of intentionality in the prep um, is truly required.
So has anyone got any pre-work that's helped them win a clone? Jed, I think you've just talked about having.
Yeah, I was just saying, I just put it in the chat, but yeah, not a specific example, but I've definitely had multiple times where I've reached out to the agency or the client and said, hey, we're working on the bid. I want to know XYZ and basically making sure you're going to give them something useful. And they always appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think it probably puts you, if you are a realistic bidder, if you're not the token triple bid, it probably puts you higher up on the list just because you're being thoughtful and asking the questions instead of just assuming.
Totally. Does anybody have any go-to questions that sort of demonstrate them as thoughtful?
Well,
Sorry, I have a question, but I don't know if it's a go-to question. Are we talking about closing um, agencies or brand? right? And also closing a client. Because to me, it's like it's not so much of a pitch. If we go straight to direct to brand, it's about winning the client without showing any work, period.
That was very interesting.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like we don't even need to go and do a dog pony show to a brand. They would have seen our website. They would have got a reference of some sort. How do you close that client? To me, is that's intriguing to me to know, right? Because to me, a pitch, there are a lot of variables in terms of closing the deal on a pitch. Also different for agency and brand. I think like Jed was saying, right? Agency or client, you have different ways to do it. So I'm just curious what you think about that.
I mean, certainly that initial presentation is about opening up a relationship, big time. Joe, you look like you're about to jump in.
I actually think this point about asking the smartest questions matters significantly more if you're not going to show work, whether that's sort of like spec work in an RFP situation, or if you're not going to do, as you say, on sort of the dog and pony show. What's going to make them see themselves being a partner with you? Often that comes down to the types of questions you ask. So one that I ask a lot and I advocate for a lot is, what's it going to take to make this happen? It's often so direct, but also pretty disarming in that it's wildly open-ended. It is asking you to tell me what you're looking for, and then either I've got a compelling answer or I don't. But I find that to be really interesting, especially if I'm not going to show.
Ooh, David? Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. So I only sell direct to brand. I don't work with agencies. And so I agree with what you said, Hung, about actually going in, the relationship being the biggest component of it. And usually the conversation starts after an email or some sort of discovery conversation on the phone. It usually starts in person with so I realized that you were thinking about talking about this, but what exactly were you hoping to talk about today in order to make our time the most valuable? And I usually start the conversation off that way. Have you read Socratic Sales Method? It was actually a Chris Do recommendation years ago to me. That was really, really valuable. But the idea of starting off just with this position of, I don't want to waste your time. I want to make sure that I'm here to actually solve your problem. And coming at it from the standpoint of, I'm going to do everything I can to solve the problem, not with my tool is the only solution to your problem, but I have a possible tool set. And if it's not the right tool set, then let me help you find the right solution to your problem, even if it's not me. And I find that it disarms people really quickly when I'm here to help you solve the problem, not to sell you something. And 9 times out of 10, it builds trust right away. At least in my case, it has.
Here's my problem, right, David? I want to just like go what you just said, right? I'm gonna be honest. I don't do any sales whatsoever. I'm a creative. I just want to get to work. So sales, I'm allergic to it in so many ways, right? So here's the problem to me, is that anything you say whatsoever will come across as salesy, because you are approaching someone with a bag of money. You say, give it to me. Give me that bag of money. Let me solve the problem for you. Now, if that person is brand new, like a brand agency, it doesn't matter. They have zero reason to give it to you without some kind of reassurance that you would do a good job, without any knowledge of you as a person, that trust. Then why would they, right? It's a risk that they have to take versus an incumbent or whoever that they have worked with before. Overcoming that, to me, is like the biggest challenge, because it's like so many variables. You got to have great work. You got to be a friendly person. You got to, I don't know, knock on their door and have coffee with them. Do a bunch of these dances that really you're not trying to be friend with this client. You're just trying to get them money at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, it's transactional, but you are allowed to have fun while you're doing it, Hung. And also like, when you think about you and Ricardo going in, maybe Ricardo is maybe more a natural salesman. He's there talking to the producer of the EP. You're the creative. I would be like looking like who are the other creatives in the room, trying to get their names, and then afterwards on LinkedIn, find those other creatives and match up with them. Like it might be that the creatives say nothing in the call and it's all just the producer talking and answering the questions. But after I've finished any presentation we do, I would try to write down names of anyone that comes up there, and I would look up who is Stuart, who is Kate, who is Anne, contact them on LinkedIn. Say, hey, so great to meet you. Here's this cool thing we did. Like, just look at other ways that you can connect with them beyond just that. My producer talks to your producer, and no one else talks. So you are trying to open up that relationship, and I would say that if you're the creative, like meet your other people and get to know them because they might be the ones saying, we got to get Bien in on this next one. Or I love those guys. So I'd say that's the opportunity for you there beyond doing the dog and pony show.
Yeah. I
What do
mean,
you call
Matt,
that?
I can testify to you that that does work. I mean, we did get a job recently because a creative director hit me up on LinkedIn, from a brand and say, hey, we've been talking, I track with you, whatever, conversations, and want to, we want to bring you in on a bid.
Hmm.
So I think that method definitely works. Sorry, Jed, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think this is one of those examples where if you can be face to face, it's a huge advantage because I feel like they want to know if you can do the job. They want to know if they can trust you. And if they don't trust you, it doesn't matter if you can do the job because they're not going to use you. And that there's something about that face-to-face interaction. All of us have been on this planet long enough to sit down with somebody and you can pretty quickly tell this person's full of shit. They're a used car salesman, or this person seems cool. They seem legit. There's a vibe that you can kind of get it over a Zoom call or a phone call, but it's not the same as sitting down with somebody.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that, Jed. 99% of the time, what starts as a phone call, I booked plane flights before to go to, I flew to Ohio. I was like, I'm gonna go meet with you and I'm just want to sit and have coffee with you. And it might not turn into anything, and that's okay. But it's kind of, you have to almost put yourself in a position of people being an end in themselves instead of a means to an end always. You kind of always have to just go into it as if it doesn't work out and turn into anything, at least we met and I was able to share something and you're going to get reps in anyways. So,
Mm.
it's open-handedness a little bit in that way.
It also shows that you're willing to do that. You're willing to invest something in the relationship if you're willing to get on a plane and go meet with somebody, that you're not just trying to quick close deals via, cold calls or emails.
Yeah, or some triggered email release system where as soon as they click on some new pixel, they get another piece of clickbait. It's too much of that. Um, let's go to number two, talking about clarity versus trumping complexity. I've got a story here where we had to do a big TV. Every time we do a pitch to a TV agency or if we're pitching a show, and I'm sure this will work with pitching a brand logline, is you've got this deck and you've worked up this deck and you've got all these bits of text all through it. But what is beautiful is when you actually take all those bits of text away. Like we make a presentation deck and we'd been working on this pitch for a show for a year. And then the minute we took all the other text away and just had the headlines and the pictures, it suddenly just seemed to make total sense. Whereas previously it was like, oh, I felt like we were forcing something through a bottleneck, but it just seemed wonderfully clear. And that happens every time that we present. You take all the other guff away. So when you're thinking about your pitch, like I know it's like you have to write a long story to write a short story, but to actually take that time to take all the other extra little words and all those extra bits and look at your pitch and go, is this is this clear? Does this make sense? Am I going to buy it? And generally, it will be a better pitch. Another thing about pitching on Zoom that I've also learned is sometimes you can turn the camera off. We had to do a big pitch to Disney, and we just said we're going to turn our cameras off and just speak to you for 20 minutes, and it made such a difference. Um, I know that some of the people with their cameras off on this call are obviously expressing themselves very clearly and beautifully, but for me, it was huge, particularly when you're focusing on this thing, you're trying to really like tell this story, and to not just be staring at this little window of you looking back at yourself, because we're all beautiful people, and it's hard to ignore that beautiful person that's staring back at you. And I guess we're animals too. You'll just get distracted. But if you've never done it, switching the camera off while you're presenting is a great release.
And what Matt and I know and talk quite a bit about is that although we are in a visual industry, the vast majority of us, our words carry weight. And when we talk about both pitching and closings, particularly, our words are going to particularly carry the weight of being memorable. When we leave the room and we lose agency and our ability to influence a person, our words are going to be what stick. So the idea that your natural charisma in the room or your ability to grab everyone's attention by shaking your hands around on Zoom are no longer present, your words are going to have to carry the day. So the idea that we can pull your face away, we can pull the words out of your deck, and your ability to sort of tell, or make and tell a story that's interesting is really, really paramount. I'll say too, along with the idea of pulling the words out and seeing how it holds up, there is a really simple barometer. Often it requires a third party or maybe a member of your team who's not working on the pitch, but it's really simple and not to be overthought. Is it interesting? I have got a client who cares very deeply about each of their pitches. They work really hard and are really meticulous and thoughtful. And every one of the sort of like proposals they send, presentations they put forth when they're in the room, are they're really intentional about making sure the prospect knows they have thought through the details of the job and proven that they are sort of like creative and technically competent enough to do it. And I had to tell this client the other day, like, brother, I believe that you can do the job, but dear God, am I bored? Like, I do not want to look at this deck, and you are not going to keep my attention for 30 minutes, let alone an hour. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so, like, that's a crazy simple barometer, and it sounds like I'm being flip, but I could not be more serious. It's like, is the thing you're presenting even interesting? I think we definitely have more to say about being distinctive, Matt, and I will get there. But like, I would challenge each and every one of you to ask yourselves if your shit is interesting. I'm not joking.
You can be distinctive you want, but being interesting definitely will get you over and above the rim. Anyone here have any ideas how they test themselves about when their pitch is clear enough? Ooh, Hung asks, are you any of you method presenters as well?
It's funny. He's like a method actor. Like for me, I lean heavily into comedy. That's my thing. Dad jokes, whatever kind of like, corny stuff. You do it enough, it's you get a smile out of people, and you make the presentation a little bit more tolerable. Because like to me, that's such a trick I lean into.
I would definitely, with my old studio partner, we would sort out who was going to be good cop and who was going to be bad cop every time we walked into a pitch. And we're like, right, you're good cop on this one. I'm going to be the mean one. I worked with another creative who would kind of really, he would create a character for himself for that pitch. Like we were pitching to a big bank, and he said, right, I'm gonna wear a jacket and be sort of suity, so I'm gonna be an architect. That's my vision. And so he gave himself this persona of the architect, and he had a jacket, and he sort of went to this semi-formal thing. So I think, yeah, you totally can create a character for yourself for a pitch if that helps you feel more comfortable, or it helps you fulfill a role that you feel like you're stretching into. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I think one time I did a presentation for Oculus and wearing the actual Oculus on the presentation, only at the beginning, it's until the gimmick ran out.
Yeah.
No, that's outstanding though, Hung. Honestly, like I believe really strongly that pitch is performance. And performance doesn't have to be comedy. It also doesn't have to be you playing a character of someone who's good at pitching, but it has to be something that's interesting enough to earn someone's attention. And that performance can look any number of ways, but it can't look like someone who doesn't want to be there, right? That performance can't be human being reading words off slide. And I've accidentally started myself down a rabbit hole. But if you've written words on a slide and you're reading them out loud, you're insulting the intelligence of the human being in the room, suggesting that they can't read and also listen to you. Of course they can, right? Like we don't have to go down that road. But if you've got nothing up your sleeve besides saying the words that you've already written that they've probably read anyway, at least one more thing's got to get up your sleeve. It just does.
Yeah. Ooh, Ed asked how many use analytics on pitches. What sort of analytics are you thinking about, Ed?
Um, I mean, I would say I'm far from the best pitcher on everything. But I do feel like, yeah, you need excitement, you need engagement. Reading what's there is terrible, but at the same time, um, we use pitch.com and it'll literally tell us like how many seconds people have spent on every slide of the pitch,
Mm.
Oh, that's very
which is
interesting.
sometimes disheartening because you'll be like, hey, this client just made this choice. And like, it might not even be a pitch. It might just be like, here's our presentation of where we're at. And you're like, they made a choice in 30 seconds and we spent 4 days developing something with different options, and they were just like, okay, cool. Number three. Um, but I feel like in that sense, like it's really good to know of like, hey, this, at least to us in our mind, like this slide was really important and maybe nobody looked at it, you know? So in that sense, like I wouldn't say like read it, but at that point, like I would know to dive in. Like we put everything in for a reason. So at that point, like let me make sure that you get this because you haven't read it so far.
No, I do all my pitch decks on Canva, and you can see how many people have opened it, how long they've spent on it, which pages occurred to them, and definitely it's for me it's a great thing. Like I just went in and presented to 20 people, and 5 people actually opened the deck when I sent it an hour later, and I think, well, that's a huge result. That's great. Um,
Yep.
One EP said, just send me a deck, and she spent 4 seconds reading it and then never opened it again. I went, yeah, forget her. I'm going to find someone else to talk to. So I think you can read the analytics either way you want. In terms of actually using analytics in a pitch, I had to present like I was doing this presentation at Deloitte, and I thought these people don't care about creative, they care about analytics. So I just made each slide a different big number with a picture behind it, and that really got their attention. They were like, "Yeah, he understands that I love numbers, and that numbers are really important to me." So I think you can make a pitch out of analytics as well, depending on who you're pitching to. I know Joe would get excited by a big number. If you had 275%, he would go, "Tell me more."
You better have a story attached. Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't just give you a number.
Yeah. Stefan, did you have a thought as well?
Yeah, I mean, so much depends on the context and the audience you're presenting to. I mean, you guys are mentioning Deloitte and Disney and Oculus and whatnot. I'm in a tiny Hawaii market, right? And so, the sense and sensibility out here is totally different. It's like, hey, you know, um, do you embody certain values that generally we embody here in this community? You know, speak on that level, right? And so a nonprofit here in Hawaii is gonna have a very different uh, buttons to push than a Deloitte boardroom or whatever. So really understand your audience is super, super key.
I'm so glad you said that. We're crushing the transitions today because that's literally exactly where we wanted to go next. We wanted to talk about being present in the room, but not just being present, also listening, not just listening for words, also listening for cues. And Matt, I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about sort of like some of your experience listening for cues or maybe not so much.
Yeah, I think I definitely used to go in to some pitches feeling like a suicide bomber. Like I had this one objective strapped to me, and if I didn't achieve that, I would blow up. Or like I think I really went in early on with this very much. I need to get this done, and then once I'd said my bit, I could go, blah. Oh, like I'm exhausted. But I had another call this week with someone we've been trying to connect with for a year, and at the beginning of the call he started breaking up with us, and he was like, oh, things are so hard, things are so bad, the industry's going south. And I was just texting my friend going, we're getting dumped, like we're getting broken up with right now. And then we actually turned it around so that by halfway through he went, hang on, what did you actually want? It's like, we didn't want any money. We just wanted a letter of intent. We want a letter of intent from you. It's like, oh, I can do that. And then it's like, oh, maybe I can introduce you to that person, and maybe we can get you that development funding. And it was really interesting how I thought this was going to be a short call, but then just through continuing the conversation by talking him through it, he actually talked himself around. And he then came back, he's yet to actually deliver those things that we wanted. But from where I thought that call was going to go in the first 5 minutes to where it went after 25 minutes was totally different. And I thought this was going to be the worst call ever. And it turned out to be just what we wanted, which was really interesting.
One of the things I like about that is listening for tone and shaping the conversation accordingly. I always recommend setting an objective before anything that feels like a sales opportunity. At the end of this conversation, ideally speaking, if I could snap my fingers and make anything happen, what would I want to happen? And then what are some other things that I would like to happen so that I can steer the conversation accordingly? Also, because I don't believe in scripts, things happen, right? And you need to react to the other human being in the room. But what is as important as anything is learning what they're saying, learning how they're saying it, and listening to the things that they're indicating are important to them. Certainly values, other contextual things, honestly, often that may be not related to the project or to their work at all, precisely because of the fact that you're not super likely to get a yes, a handshake, and a signature in the physical or digital room, which is the whole thing we're talking about, right? There is a gap between however good or bad a conversation is and the moment in which your project is awarded and you get your money, right? And those are also not the same moment. They're really, really protracted timelines. And so when you think a thing has gone well, and maybe you've even gotten a verbal yes, we're going to make this project happen, days, weeks, months can go by, and you may feel like you have lost your agency. Often it feels like the only recourse is to kind of show back up with your hand out, right? Like, hey, are you ready to give me this thing? Hey, are you ready to give me this thing? Hey, are you ready to give me this thing? But observing the cues in the conversation, observing the things that matter to the person, personally, professionally, contextually around the job and in their life, every one of those things is an additional door through which you can walk to re-engage them and make yourself memorable over the course of the days, weeks, months it takes for that decision to be made. And that decision, again, is one in which you probably have no agency, even if you were the perfect fit. And so I appreciate that point about sort of like articulating values or articulating ways in which you sort of embody the culture. You might have an opportunity to follow up and demonstrate that. Maybe that's sort of sending a gift. I'm often sending content I've read that I think that they might find interesting or intriguing, or a personal anecdote if and when it fits. Even if the only thing it does is show that you were listening when they were speaking, you have created mental availability for yourself in a dead space where you might otherwise be forgotten. Again, even if you were the right fit, they might have just forgotten that you were the right fit. These things happen.
Yeah, there's a lot going on upstairs that you're not a party to, and people spend so much of their time not being listened to that showing that you were listening is massive. We had insight number 4, Joe. It's one that I'm close to. It's narrative and talking about a value narrative. Talk to me about narrative.
So I have um, I have a strong belief that if you've pitched work against an ask, it might be the best work ever, and you might have sort of like work that shows that you can deliver it. That may be good, and you may have one work that way, and you may win this work that way. But if we're talking about closing, right? If we're talking about bridging the gap between the moment where you get to show them how cool you are and the moment in which they say, this is the vendor we want for the thing, you are more likely to lose if you have pitched on a delivery narrative. This is the work we do and for whom we do it, because it's just not that memorable. And the art of the close is about creating a value driven narrative that is interesting enough to stick in their minds when you are not present.
Mm. Yeah, that same pitch where we went and pitched that big bank and the guy dressed up as an architect. The end of each treatment we gave was a different, we mocked up a different front page from the Australian Financial Review showing this was the outcome of this campaign turned out this way and this campaign turned out that way. And I guess like finding, and Stefan, even in on a small, community Hawaii level, I'm sure there are outcomes which would matter beyond just I sent you a QuickTime file at Wednesday, the 5th of June. There's something where you can go, and here's how this community changed. Like showing that future narrative and showing what's the result of the work and the result of your thinking is way more impressive and we will stick and powerful than just I can upload a file to Dropbox and send it to you in 3 weeks.
And I think we talked about this quite a bit in the pre-work section, right? When we do discovery and when we ask thoughtful questions, we do the work of demonstrating that we are interested in solving a problem. If you are afraid of indicating that you are interested in discovering the problems so that you can solve them, you are likely to deliver a narrative at the end that is about that is about work delivery, and you are likely to deliver a narrative that is going to be forgettable if that gap moves from one day to 1 month. All of the work that you've done needs to go into a story that you make and a story that you tell that says the type of problems we solve are the type of problems you have, and we're uniquely equipped because of the type of human beings we are and the type of ways we sort of apply our unique skills and resources. And if that narrative is missing from your high agency moments, again, whether that's a pitch of creative work or whether that's a one-to-one conversation sort of directly with a brand about a long-term relationship, if your value narrative is missing from your high agency moment, in your lowest agency moments, the only thing they have to go back to is the other work you have. And it doesn't mean that that's not good, right? Like your work is probably good, otherwise you wouldn't be in business. It's just not as memorable. And that is the biggest problem in closing that gap between the moment in which you get to sort of demonstrate your competency and the moment in which they select a vendor.
Mm. Yeah, and in terms of narrative, if that's a foreign word to you, like the best description I heard from that is like it's basically the story between where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow. And that your work and this project is going to stitch those two things together. And you're just trying to show how this project proves that, which it definitely will. I think some
And
people are jumping off, and I think we're getting close to time. Well,
love
we're
that.
over time, but
And yeah, honestly, I love the way that you've said that, Matt. Even if the delta between point A and point B is this small, it's envisioning a future in which the client can participate. And that is exciting to human beings. They make
yeah.
decisions emotionally. And so, the way we can tap into that is by telling stories that trigger emotion. So, all of that is to say, Matt and I love words. We are in a visual industry. Use them words.
We are going to be talking more about this month. Definitely. Big takeaway from you, Joe. What's your biggest takeaway when it talks about closing and how to seal a deal?
It's that you don't have to despair in your lowest agency moment, but you do have to capitalize on your highest agency moment. Um, but in those moments where you're just waiting for the thing to happen, you can make the thing happen in different ways. You don't have to say, hey, is it time? Hey, did you pick me? Hey, did you pick me? You can use the cues that you've observed to create high agency moments for yourself and create opportunities to get back in their life. I think you don't have to kind of live in the doldrums of wondering if you've been picked as that gap between maybe the soft yes or maybe not a yes at all drags on until project awards. I think my big takeaway is you have some agency in those moments, even when it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, and I would say, when it comes to being in the room and that half hour or that 45 minutes you get, staying present and listening. So whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, really treasure that time you've got together because you fought very hard to get there. You did a lot of work to even be in that room. So make the most of it. And whether you're talking or listening, listen. I mean, especially if you're talking shouldn't just be a one-way thing. Remember to stop and breathe. Remember to ask questions. Remember to get people involved in that conversation. So it's not just you talking until you're done and then flopping out exhausted and leaving the room. I think if you can make that moment one of understanding them more and hearing them, and that gives you something to come back with later and show them what you heard, show them that you were aware of their needs and you were aware of them as human beings. Next week, we're going to talk about being distinctive and memorable, which is a pretty good segue from this one, and one that Joe and I are both very keen on pushing.
Yeah, really excited about that. As always, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for participating. Really enjoy these conversations. We'll be excited
Thank
to
you.
talk to you again next week.
Yeah, thank you. See you guys. Go be
See you
memorable.
all. Have a good one.